Hey guys, video number 4. You're probably all jumping around and thinking, where is she? But I wanted to chunk this down because it's a lot of information, and I do go off on tangents on a bit, and it just sort of keeps me going. So in video 1, we spoke about what to do if social services want to come in and have a chat with you and investigate a claim that's been made. In video, we also talked about section 20, section 17, section 47. I'm sure there's probably loads of more that go on, but these are the ones that I feel that is relevant and that can help you through this process very quickly. In video 3, we talked about what Child Protection Conference was, child protection, children in need. And in the video just gone, we talked about child protection orders, the 72-hour process. And in this video, I want to talk about the 26-week court process and what to do, really, if those orders are granted. So very, very quickly, because I'm so tired. And the reason that I'm throwing these all out there today is because I'm literally shutting things down while I finish these 3 books that I'm going to be writing, and only really because I get so many projections, and I've had another campaigner make a false allegation to social services, and I'm not willing to jeopardise my children for the sake of absolute numpties. But these videos are for the genuine parents who genuinely need help, and have found themselves in social services or are about to find themselves in social services. So in my case with Aaron and Faith, the removal was done and I was thrown into the court process. I didn't understand. I was sort of thinking, you took my kids within 2 minutes, you can give them back within 2 minutes. But unfortunately, it's a process. Now, as it stands at the moment, it's a 26-week process. It used to be that they just went on each month until the matter was resolved or a decision was made. Now, some people have been through child protection for ages, ongoing, nothing's changing, they're not working with the system, and it's gone to the courts, and the children are still with them, and the decision is whether there should be a removal. Or in my case, there was a removal, and it was whether or not any orders should be granted, or what they basically say is no orders, care and placement order, which is basically to head to an adoption order, or long-term foster care order, or an ICO, which is to be placed with another family member. It's really daunting. Okay, so going on the basis that you're going through this with your children with you, then I mean, I would even think of putting trackers on your kids, all this sort of stuff. But obviously, if they've got your kids, it's really difficult to work with somebody while they've got a ransom over you and while you're in an emotional wreck. So be presentable. You will literally arrive at a court. It feels very daunting. It feels like you're going to see the headmistress of school. You can be in a place here where you've got a knot in your stomach because you don't know where your children are. I mean, if you're lucky, and then your children are with family and you know where they are, that's not so bad. But if they're with foster carers that you've not met, you don't know where they are, you can feel really daunting. I would always advise anybody, as you're arriving at the court, one, you've either got your legal with you or you're representing yourself. A lot of people will tell you not to have solicitors. They're all paid by the same people. But to be honest, the paperwork can be so inundating. I would get a solicitor to do that paperwork. And if you want to actually represent yourself, even with a solicitor, you can do. The only time you get a barrister is when it's actually going into the main court days. So basically, you'd arrive, and I would advise you to interact with the social worker, okay? I would advise you to say hello. I would advise you to speak with them. I'd advise them to ask how your children are doing. Do they need anything? How they're getting on? Now, sometimes they won't necessarily talk to you. If you're up on actual charges, again, this is not for people who have caused significant harm to their child. This is for people who have either been through domestic violence where the children have not been harmed, where there has been situations where somebody has been raped, gone to the police station, the children have been placed in foster care during this time, and then they've decided that the parent didn't safeguard the children. Don't forget, this is all coming from a safeguarding point of view. It is not coming from a how do I help and support this family. Now that's where I'm going to come in later, because this is what I'm going to be campaigning about and what I'm going to be pushing. Now, I explained a minute ago that sometimes you can come straight in on the first one and you can be before the Justice of Peace. So that would be 3 judges, okay? Or you might just be before one judge, which will be called which will be classed as a district judge, okay? Now, as you come into the courtroom, and there'll be a tables, you'll have yourself with your representation or non-representation. You'll have your partners if they're engaging in this process and their legals, or if they're representing themselves. And then you'll have social services and then their legals, and then you'll have CAF and then their legals. Okay, so CAF is basically your children's guardian. Okay. Now, unfortunately, once it enters into this arena, it divides. So you're not all working together for the best interest of the child. It's 4 separate entities, 3 if only one parent is engaging. Now, one thing that is really, 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 really important. A lot of parents say they wouldn't engage with my family members. My family wasn't allowed into the courts. My mum wanted to help, but they wouldn't let them in. Okay. Now, the reason this is because your parent or your friends or your family has to become parties to proceedings. This is why it's going wrong. People have other people who want to get involved, but they have to become parties to proceedings, which means they also have to stay there with their solicitor and they become part of that court process. Other than that, it's a closed court. Okay. Now, this is something else I wanted to explain, is within that court arena, you have a right to a private life, which is why it's a closed court, which is why it's a secrecy. Okay, it's not because they're taking you into a court and they want to be all, we're not letting you do this and we're not letting you do that. The reason this happens is actually an 18th century law that basically grants children and family the right to a private life. It means that no journalists, well, actually, because everybody's pushed for an open court, of which I didn't agree with. I don't agree with an open court. And what I believe should happen is, if there are complaints, then the independent investigator should be allowed into the court process, which isn't happening. I do not agree with the courts being open. I believe with transparency, but I do not believe that we should have our lives posted all over the papers, social media and everything, because, you know, this matter's come to a head. I do know of people who have been wrongfully accused of paedophilia. I do know people who have been wrongfully accused of assaulting their child, and you don't want that all over tomorrow's paper. So the reason that that is a closed court is because you've got a right to a private life, and more so your child has a right to a private life, because you've got to understand that this particular system, the child protection system, was done on the basis that children were abused. So if a child has been abused, that child has a right for nobody to know that that's gone on. Hence why it's a closed court. It's campaigners that have called it the secret courts. Okay. Now, you are allowed to discuss your case with people. You are allowed to seek legal advice. What they don't want is, obviously, did you know that this little child was, you know, and things like that. So this is why it's a closed court. Okay, this is why it's classed as the secrecy, because it's a family secret. You don't want to air all your dirty laundry out in public, really. I mean, I never ever thought that I was going to write my dirty laundry all over Facebook. So that's why it's a closed court, or was a closed court. Now, I've just said about parties to proceedings, haven't I? Okay, right, okay. So literally what they do is they present a statement. Now, this is where you've got to work with your solicitor, or if you're doing it yourself, make sure you know what the process is. So it will basically be a headed piece of paper, and it will have your name, children's, and it will be like social services, or it will be Flintshire County Council, or it will be the county council, okay? So once you enter into the court arena, social workers are no longer social workers. They become officers of the state, okay? And what basically happens is in that they will build what's called a genealogy, okay? And that genealogy is basically a list of times and dates that you've ever been involved in any of the services. So like I was explaining in the previous meeting, this is a multi-agency. So this will have the list of if you've ever been involved with social services before, if there's been any police records, if there's anything on your medical notes that needs to be brought forward, and it will have sort of your name, your date of birth, the live births of your children and their date of births, and then literally anything that's ever been listed on there, okay? And you should have a copy of and see this. So your court bundle, you should always have access to this. Now, if you're legally representing yourself, this will all be sent to you. If you've got a solicitor, it will be sent to them. Now, there is legal aid, people. You keep being told there's no legal aid, but there's legal aid for any matter that involves children until they're 18. There's also legal aid for you to appeal. There's a legal aid for you to oppose. There's legal aid pretty much all the way through. It's fearmongers who are telling you that there isn't. I've got legal aid to sue, okay? So when you sit down with your solicitor, the social worker and the CAFCAF officer will each do their own report. And that report will be based on what brought you into the courts in the first place, what that information was, and you have got to counteract that with your solicitor, okay? So they will both build statements. So there'll be statement 1, then there'll be statement 2, and then there'll be statement 3, and that's through the 26-week court process. They will also do what's called a parental assessment, okay? So this is, again, it's in the court arena, and it will come under a section 47, and they are gathering all of that information. You might be asked to sign a freedom of request. That means they want to access your medical notes. They want to access any organisation that you're involved in. So if that's drugs or alcohol or mental health or domestic violence, they want to access the records to that. You have a right to see this, and this is why I always say to people to get time to go through your paperwork. Red if it's wrong, amber if it's a misunderstanding, green if it's correct. You know, your solicitor only gets legal aid for so many hours, so you've got to work very quickly with that solicitor. And again, if your children are not with you, you're in quite an emotional tangle. It's not, don't be a victim. Don't be a victim. Yeah, don't be a victim. Stand strong, stand firm. It's okay to cry. It's okay to miss your kids. It's okay to feel the way that you're feeling. But what you've got to do is have some emotional intelligence about you while you're dealing with the professionals, okay? Like I say, bow down to win. You will sit and you'll speak with a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Yes, there are some dodgy factors going on with this. And what I will tell you is no psychologist is looking for what is right with you. Okay. They're only looking for what is wrong. And then they are going to do a DSM-5 and they're going to come out with a diagnosis. And actually, sometimes they come out with no diagnosis. But it's all about the information you give. So if a psychologist is doing a review, they will be given all of your information. So they will be given your medical notes, any previous psychological notes, any other soft notes. They will sit and they will interview you. I was actually quite lucky. I got about 10 hours on mine. And then they will go through and they will write a report, and then they will come out if there is any diagnosis. If that psychiatrist comes back with a diagnosis, and I suggest you get your ass to the doctors very, very, very quickly, you take that diagnosis with you to your GP, and you get your GP to refer you to the mental health sides within your own, and then therefore you are engaging with the system, you're working with the system, and it's done immediately. If not, go and get a private psychological assessment, and you've got to come in and bang and counteract that. If it's true, yeah, I went through sexual abuse. I've got rejection issues. I've got attachment disorder issues, hence why they can call me narcissistic traits. None of that stuff isn't true. It's true. I can't deny that. I can't help what my life was as a child. What I can do is how it's affected me. Okay. And literally from there, as long as you've engaged with the system, there is no problems. But what they will say is, can it be done within the 26-week court frames? Now, it used to be that adoption was quite a first resort. It's now the last resort. So as long as you have literally done that, you've gone to the GP, you've handed over that diagnosis, your GP is either going to write a report to say, well, actually, that report isn't correct. So then it's null and void and it's moved, and I've seen it done, and it does. If that psychologist has written a report that you know is completely wrong and so much information is wrong, again, you have procedures that you can follow. All of the psychologists are held under the HCPC, the psychological board of something. It's exactly the same as the courts. If the courts don't follow processes, there are complaints procedures for the courts. If the solicitors doesn't, there are complaints procedures for the solicitors. If social services do anything wrong, there are complaints. It's all about you actually utilising and doing it, okay? And I hope that you come through the courts with either the help that you need or false allegations quashed. And once you've come through that process, get it all quashed and get it all reprimanded. It's worth doing, just in case you ever find yourself in that situation again. As with me, as you can hear my throat, this is my EDS. I had lots of other things going on. You know, EDS is the easiest condition to claim to have, blah, 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 blah. If I knew what I knew now, when I went through it with Aaron and Faith, I guarantee you Aaron and Faith would be with me right now. So, yet again, video 1, I've explained what to do if they want to come in and investigate. I've explained to section 20. I've explained to section 17. I've explained to section 47. In the second video, I've explained child protection, children in need. This one I've done the 72, no, the one before that I've done 72 hours for an emergency protection order, and this one I've involved in the court process. What I would say is, mainly with the court process, it's how you feel about it, okay? A lot of people you see stood outside the courts, very nervous, not quite sure what to do with themselves, feel like a little kid at the first day of school or in high school going to see the headmaster. That's for you to deal with, okay? If you take that into the courtroom, then you're going to set yourself up for a fall, really. So don't take that into the courtroom. Follow the process, understand it. If the judge is speaking and you're going, that's not correct, which I did, okay, then he is going to hold you in contempt of court, okay? Now, if what they do is, within the 26-week court process, you go back to court each month, okay? Now, I went back to court quite a few times because I had non-molestation orders on me because I found my kids. I had gagging orders on me because I spoke out. So I was in and out of court all the way through, and I was just chasing my tail. I just didn't know what I was doing, where I was going. They just came in and just spun me out of control, and I found myself out there not knowing what to do. My kids on care and placement orders, and nobody could tell me what the process is or what to do. Now, unfortunately, if, like me, you find you get yourself to the end of this 26-week court process and the judge orders for either long-term foster care or a placement order, like I got, there are many, 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 many roads you can take from here. It's all about how you respond to what's happened, okay? If you go, my kids have gone and I'm going to become an alcoholic and a drug addict and I'm such a victim and I don't know what to do and I'm so depressed, I miss my kids and I can't get out of bed. Well, you ain't going to see your kids. You've got to get up. You've got to deal with it. You've got to go, these cunts have got my kids, don't say that to them. Find a really good friend that you can rant to about what's going on, but don't speak to them that way. Okay, you've got to keep diaries of everything that's going on. Keep as many recordings as you can. As I always tell people, double up. Okay, always have a recording that you present to them to tell them that you're recording. If they ask you to switch it off, you've got a double one on you. Okay, I could probably get into trouble to telling you to do that, but so be it. You may find that you need this later on down the road. If you haven't any recordings, then keep notes. Make sure that you write a diary of what day you went to court, what it was like with your contact, because they'll have contact reports within the courts as well. That will all go into your parental assessment. Make sure when you're turning up to contact that you're turning up with the stuff that your children needs, that you're engaging with the workers, that you're asking how your kids are. And yes, of course, tell your kids that you love them and you miss them and you'll see them soon. Don't discuss the court process with them unless they're old enough to do so. If they're little kids, then why would you talk to them about this? Sometimes it is better to lie to your children in these processes. Sometimes it's better to tell them that, you know, mummy's not feeling very well at the moment and you're with some lovely people, because why would you want to cause your children trauma? Okay. Sometimes telling them that, you know, that these are nasty people is not such a great idea. Okay. I can explain all this stuff at another day. I'm going to set up a conference where I can explain this all properly. This is like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm very tired. I've had a very long week. And this is just because there's some people out there that need this information and I can't take calls. I can't deal with cases. There's so many of you. You know, literally around this country right now, there's so many. There's 140 something thousand children in foster care. I don't know how many people are sitting within the courts at the moment. But the aim of the video was to keep you out of courts. I'm talking about situations where other people have brought you into social services. Don't be stupid enough to turn to them in the first place. There's other organisations that can help you. You have friends, family, and maybe, you know, realise that you don't necessarily need so much drama in your life, so don't create it. Maybe you're stronger than you think and you can get through situations a lot better than you originally thought. So really don't put yourself in that situation to enter the lion's den in the first place. But if you find yourself being forced into the lion's den, then I hope I've given you enough information that you can sort of skip through and understand these processes, and you've got enough to go on to Google. And if you struggle with writing, then get somebody to explain it. If you do have dyslexia, then you can go to your Citizen Advice and they will explain that process to you in a way that you will understand. If you get an advocate, they'll explain it to you. But like I've said, if you do find that your children on placement orders, you can appeal. You've got 21 days to appeal. There is legal aid for your solicitors to do this, or you can do this process yourself. You can go on and actually Google how to appeal a placement order, and you can follow that process. I'm sure within different networks, if actually people spent more time helping, educating and training each other rather than trolling each other, we would all have our kids back. I'm sure there's other people out there who could have taught this to me. Yeah, there's people who could have sat down and taught this to me. Nobody taught me this stuff. I've had to literally gather pieces of information, read, and finally 7 years later, I'm sitting here knowing more than I did back then. Or not 7 years since they were taken, so it's 7 years. Oh, well, nearly. In fact, it's his birthday. But if you do find yourself on this and there's an appeal process, you can follow that appeal process. If people are telling you that once your children have been put on placement orders, that's it, they're wrong, okay? They're wrong. It's not over. It's far from over. In fact, it's far, far, far from over. That doesn't mean that your children have been adopted. That just means that they've been granted permission to remove your parental rights to place them into adoption. Then now they're going to start the process to find the adopters. And during that time, you've got the time to sort your shit out. Now, you can do a, what's it called? Okay, so you can appeal, and even if that appeal is refused, you can appeal again. Now, after 6 months, and I'm trying to tick my brain over to try to remember because I'm really doing this off the cuff. I could sit here with Google, but after 6 months' time, you can do it will come to me in a minute. But basically, you've got 6 months to prove yourself. Okay, so after 6 months, as long as your children have not actually been placed with a potential adopter, and it will come to me in a minute, okay, there's something that you can do, and I can't remember what it's called. And literally, after 6 months, you can go in and you can show change of circumstances and that you're ready to come back. So if your kids have been taken because you're homeless, then you could have found a home in that time, and that's a change of circumstances. If you were in domestic violence, you can show that you've done the Freedom Programme and you've completed it, and you can show change of circumstances. If you were drug dependent and you've been through the process, you can show that it's a change of circumstances. If you were alcohol tolerant, then you can show that change of circumstances. If there was some mental health, you can show that you've worked with the system and there is change of circumstances. And it's still not coming to me what it's called. So maybe that's because you're going to find out. Now, if your child has not been placed for a year, then you can do what's called a freeing order. Now, if they're on long-term foster care, then that's not long-term foster care, by the way. That's just the order that's been granted. So if someone tells you that your child is now on long-term foster care and they're going to remain in foster care until they're 18, that's only the order that they've won there. You can appeal that. And also you can keep showing how you're working with the system along the way, and you could find that you could get your kids back. In fact, I don't even know how many kids we've brought back from long-term foster care, but there's been many of them. That's been whether they've been on an ICO place with parents or whether they've been in foster care. Loads of kids have come back. The only time they're on long-term foster care is if you believe they're on long-term foster care and you just don't work with it, you disengage with the system, you're not interested with children. And to be honest, if you don't want your children, then back off and let them have a forever family. I really would. But if you do want your children back, and I hope you do, because why wouldn't you? Some people can't cope, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not about not wanting them. It's about actually admitting that you can't cope with the full-term responsibility of your children. And you might actually have a part-time relationship with your kids. There have been people who have started with no contact with their children at all and have been in long-term foster care. And they do jump it down because at the end of the day, they're building up to dropping you out. But you've got to keep that going. So you've got to keep asking for more contact orders. I think it's an N2 form where you can ask for contact for your children. You apply for it. I want to see my kids put in a form. Still won't come to me what that bloody damn thing's called. It's not permission to oppose. It's a revokement of the placement order. That's it. So basically, after 6 months' time, you can ask for a revokement of the placement order. So what you're basically saying is, and there is legal aid for this, or you can do it yourself. So what you're basically saying is, my change of circumstances, if the information is incorrect, then you might have had time during this time to have that information omitted. So you're going back to the courts to say, the information that you've taken my children with was incorrect. This is the evidence that I've got that proves it, and I'd like to revoke the placement order. They say, fantastic, great, revokement, you can pick your kids up. If it is that actually you did have these issues, and you've carried on and you've worked, then you go forward and you revoke the placement order, and you show that you've either got a psychological report that says that you've worked well with the system, or you've done this course, or you've done that, and then you go along and you revoke the placement order and you prevent that adoption happening. Now, you can issue an injunction on preventing the adoption order while you get things together. You can prevent them from being placed in. There's all these different things that you can do. Now, you cannot apply to revoke the order within 6 months. It has to be 6 months. But if your child is placed with the adopters, potential adopters, you can't do this. So it's only if they haven't found a placement for your child in that time. Yes, it means your children will be. In fact, actually, someone told me that their child was advertised on Gumtree. Yes, children have been advertised in papers. Yes, children have been advertised on websites. I don't agree with it. Yes, children go to adoption parties. I don't agree with it. And this is why we've all got to work together to change this system. But if you are in this system and this has happened to you, especially sitting on forced adoption, if you're sitting on forced adoption right now and you're only sitting on placement orders, then please follow these proceedings or processes. Again, I'm not legal. I'm just a mum that's been through it. Now, the other thing is if your child is placed with an adopter and you can't do a revokement of the placement order, you've got to get yourself in an issue in a situation to oppose the adoption order. Okay, so take that time where there's nothing you could do. That's 6 months. Yeah, what I did was I went out and campaigned, and I did actually get a house and a job in place and stuff, but I campaigned, and what I should have done was got my shit together properly. So literally, like I've said, if there's homeless issues, you found an adequate home. If it's that you needing to get a job, you found a job. If it's you've got mental health issues, you've dealt with that. So literally, what will happen is your child will be placed with the potential adopters. The adopter, after I think it's after 10 weeks, goes, yes, we love these children, and we want to adopt them. And what they'll do is they then have to file to the courts to say, yes, we choose to adopt these children. And then what you do is you then tick a box to say, no, I oppose. Okay. And then you step into the court arena and you show that there's been significant changes, or that paperwork that was incorrect has been corrected. And you basically crush the situation and your child comes home. Or you may have found another family member, because adoption should be the last resort. So if there are family members, like I've said in this video or previous one, they have to become parties to proceedings to show that they are there to support you and the children. And then obviously if that doesn't work, you appeal it. Now, obviously, once an adoption has been granted, an adoption is meant to be for life. However, in the last couple of years, a number of adoptions have been revoked, reversed. So it is happening. But again, this is all on how you deal with your paperwork. So as I've told people, again, it's hard. Sometimes you're reading things about you and you've really got to hit it on the chin and take it for what it is and accept it and take responsibility and deal with that. Sometimes you're dealing with the guilt that you've caused this to your child to be removed. Sometimes you're dealing with the shame and embarrassment that you're having to walk down the street that your children have been taken. I mean, I still go through it with Elijah and Shiloh. I still go to mums and tots groups where people go, oh, have you got any more children? And I find myself in this situation. I have to deal with that shame, quite a lot. And you've got to deal with that. And to be honest, some of the best things that parents can do is go and get counsellors and psychiatrists to get the help for removals, because it's begging more questions on why this is happening. So yeah, I think that's, and a year. If your child has been on an order for a year with no placement, you can do what's called a freeing order. So please don't let anybody tell you that the current situation you're in is the whole situation and there's no other way around it. The only way that will happen is if you believe that. So if you believe there's nothing you can do, and this is what happened to me, okay? So when Aaron and Faith were taken, I went onto Google, blah, 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 blah. I come across Scott, and it was Family Army and that got in contact with me, and they made me believe that there was nothing I can do. So I just pushed further. Yeah, I was like, whoa, I'm not having people tell me there was nothing I can do, blah, blah, blah. They did tell me about the appeal process, but they told me, oh, it will be refused and then you do this. And they gave me the wrong advice, okay? I found myself on a hiding to nowhere. In fact, I wasted a year doing an appeal that I couldn't even present because I'd already presented it to a high court. And that was down to people giving me bad and wrong advice. Okay. And you've got 21 days to appeal that. Okay. Now, again, there are people out there where that order is granted that their child is on long-term foster care. So if someone tells you your child is on long-term foster care and you believe that, then you're going to accept that to be a truth. So you say, with all due respect, you may believe that my child is going to be on long-term foster care. However, I reckon I can turn this around in 6 to 8 weeks. I can turn this around into 18 months. So that's not long-term. That's not till 18, okay? I think that's pretty much it. I think I might be able to go to bed, watch a film or something, and at least know that even if one person has watched this and learned something that they didn't know, that, you know, they can turn this whole situation around. Or even if you're a parent and your child has been adopted and you watch this and think, oh my goodness, I lost my kids because I didn't know the process. You know, I turned into a lioness mother, and you know, and I read comments, you know, I tell my social worker how much I fucking hate her all the time. Well, that social worker is telling you how your children are going to be on adoption orders, because if they can't work with you, if they can't build a relationship with you, then they can't investigate you and they can't get to the bottom of what the problem is. And, you know, even the chair said to me, you know, thank you so much, Kelly, for being transparent and working with us, because if you hadn't have done that, then you wouldn't be sitting here with a social worker saying that what an amazing, beautiful mum you are, and, you know, how great your kids are. And even a different social worker, in fact, I think I've had 3 in this particular process. You know, he sat here the other day and, you know, I've got a 19-month-old who knows his numbers, his alphabet, and he's sitting there saying, you know, this is because of your parenting. So he's able to go back to social services and say, you know, this is a mum that, you know, despite everything, they can say positive things about you. Please don't be fear-mongered, people. Please don't get your head caught up in all of this, the paedophilia and the social services are kidnapping kids. Just, I'm not saying on the grand scale of all of how this is working, the end result is Aaron and Faith were taken without my consent. That means they were kidnapped. They were stolen from me, just like they were with every other parent that I know who's lost their children. I've seen people lose their children for the most ridiculous situations, and sometimes it has just been down to the way the parent has worked with them, okay? I have seen where one parent is engaging and the other parent is rearing up and getting angry and aggressive. And I get it. I get it. I understand it. We all say it. In fact, we had a conversation only a couple of days ago after somebody made a false allegation, and my partner made it very clear, you touch my kid, I'll fucking kill you. And this was in front of the social worker, but this was a social worker who was parent, and he gets it. He gets it. He gets that emotion. He gets that raw emotion. He gets that feeling. And the more you treat them as humans, the more they'll treat you as humans. Please don't think that every social worker out there is out to remove children, because I've spoken to hundreds of social workers now. And actually, most social workers will say, we don't want to take children. The only reason we are ending up taking children is because we've got cause for concern and the parent won't work with us, and we have got no other choice but to take that child because we can't get past the parent. A lot of parents are losing their children because they won't work with this system. Now, you can step back and go, fuck you, I'm off to France. And you can. Yeah, you can do that. But if they've got significant cause for concern, they're going to come after you. I have seen parents run. I've seen them caught. I've seen parents brought back from other countries. And those removals are harder, faster, and more traumatic than I have ever seen. And when a parent goes down with a fight, what are you going to do, people? Shoot them? Seriously? Are you going to do that? Because you're going to be sitting in jail for 10 to 15 years while your child is serving jail time in foster care and potentially adopted anyway. So if you come from a point of view that social services are there to protect children, and it just so happens that somebody's made a false allegation to you, then just open your hands, show them that your hands are clean, and give them the evidence and proof. And if you can't, be a humble servant and show them the heart that you have, okay? And I hope to God you come through this system unscathed, and I hope to God that you learn this process, because by understanding what you're going through, it makes things easier. By understanding that you're going to attend a meeting but you're not actually on child protection can make such a difference to somebody, because it can change the whole way that you deal with it. For you to sit there, and I do. I'm a hypocrite. I do it. Come on. I sat in a child protection meeting and they all went around the thing and I went, conformity. Absolute conformity. Yeah, I've done it. But at the end of the day, I have got 2 little boys that are here with me at home. And, social services have seen me and Dean go through absolute all sorts. They've seen us nearly tearing each other to parts going through this. They've seen us stick together. They've seen us work together. They've seen us rowing. It's been a real up and down, but I've built a really lovely relationship with our social workers. Now I'm going to get a shock and a half if all of a sudden some other idiot out there decides to make another phone call and my social worker's off and it goes through the system. But luckily, I'm going through an injunction on a couple of people with the police anyway. So I'm quite happy to work with this system. I've seen too many children abused, and I've seen what these social workers are having to go through. And my foster father is actually the one who won the award as one of the greatest foster care social workers awards. And I've seen some really genuine people. And by going down to BASWA, which is the British Association of Social Workers, I've met some really, really, really beautiful people who really care, who really want to change this system and agree with me that this should be about a family model. This should be about supporting families. This should be about enabling families. So it doesn't matter if somebody comes below the threshold. The system should be working to help the family above the threshold. But at the end of the day, you can lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink them. What I've noticed about a lot of parents in this network is they actually like the drama in their lives. And if you are feeding and thriving off this drama and you believe that your life is like an EastEnders soap drama, I suggest you go and get your head wobbled. I suggest you go and deal with whatever trauma it is that you're dealing with. And if you believe that it's okay to emotionally abuse your children, explaining and telling them that social workers are this and that, then you really need a checkup from the neck up. And I'm not saying that you deserve to have your children taken. Nobody deserves to go through that. But if children need protecting, they need protecting. And sometimes parents can't even see how they are causing trauma to their children. Even going through this process caused trauma to my 2 older boys, and I've had to bend the knee to my kids and say sorry for what I've put them through, because at the end of the day, I'm the one that's put them through it. I'm the one that's lost my children, even if that's because I brought a child into the world and I didn't know what the Children's Act was. The fact is, someone put my children in a vulnerable situation and I wasn't armed with the knowledge or the understanding to protect my children, which ultimately makes me responsible for losing my children. Call it a kidnap, call it, stealing children. As I said at the beginning of this video, no social worker sits in a meeting and randomly selects a house. It takes for somebody to bring something to them that makes them want to come out and speak to you. And if you listen to people out there who tell you to shut the door, don't let them in, then I guarantee you they are going to come with the police, or they're going to go to that court to get that order, and they will remove prior to doing that investigation. And you're going to find that the only person who lost the kids was you. So please, please, please learn this process. And I'm going to get shot in the foot, and people are going to turn around and say they're this, they're that, and they're providing false information. That is up to you to make sure that they know that that information is incorrect, or they've misheard something that you've said, or they've written it down incorrect. And there is a process to give you the time to present this stuff, rather than going in there screaming and shouting, you're lying, that's incorrect. There is a process for you to follow, and for you to submit that information to make sure that whoever you're in front of is making sure that they're aware of what's going on. And it's all about your presentation. It's all about how you deal with this. Like I've said, getting into bed and crying your eyes out and turning to drugs and turning to alcohol, or going on a rampage is not going to bring your children back. Actually getting your act together, getting yourself together, getting a really good support network about you. There's nothing wrong with breaking down. There's nothing wrong with crying. But always remember, with every breakdown comes a breakthrough. And as long as you're constantly looking for solutions, then you're going to keep coming through this. Sometimes the social workers are going to change, but the only thing that doesn't change is your paperwork. And if you can get the support with the paperwork, then you can come through this very, very, very quickly. And I think last thing on this matter really is, to those who have lost their kids, to those whose children have been adopted, please don't think they don't come home, because they do. In fact, if you follow Ewan, who's out in Belfast, he's actually a child who was taken himself, and he's out there campaigning for us parents. And they do come and find you. And if you are laying comatose in a bed, drugged out of your head, or drinking, or you've ended up on the streets, and your child comes and finds you, they're going to believe that they were taken rightfully in the first place. So be somebody that your child wants to find. Be somebody that when your child comes to find you, that they don't believe that everything that was said to them was true. And also, you've got letterbox contact as well. Make sure you're accessing that. If you want to push, there's open adoptions now. You can push to see your children. There is so much that you can do out there. It's just that for as long as people are fear-mongering you, they are not giving you solutions, okay? There's a great woman out there, Caroline. I can't remember what the name of her site is, but she's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. She will tell you what the process is. She'll tell you how to deal with the process. But you can go to the likes of other things. I mean, stay out of UK social services. What is it? Against social services or something. There's trolls. It's absolutely loaded and infiltrated, by the way. It's been infiltrated by government. It's been infiltrated by the police. It's been infiltrated by social services. And it's been infiltrated, and we know this. And I know this because I've spoken to some of the people who are infiltrating it. And, standing outside Downing Street going, David Cameron is a paedophile, that's not the way to go. The whole point of actually bringing everybody out was to show how many people this was happening to, to show by the mass that there was lots of families who'd been on a hiding to nowhere. But unfortunately, parents didn't want to get out of bed. And when I hear from parents, oh, but I can't afford to do this. And I even hear parents say, oh, I can't afford to get to contact. Well, if you can't make an effort to get to contact, how can you show these people that you can financially support your children? Because at the end of the day, I'm sorry, people, but if you lived in Australia, if you lived in America, there is no benefit system. There is no housing benefit. Yeah, you are expected to work and support your own children. And if you can't even get to contact because you can't afford it, how are you expected to show them that you can raise your children? Because there's people out there with lovely houses who can afford to look after your children, and who are going to give them the whole world, and who are going to love them, and are going to adore them, and are going to give them the best opportunities they can. So you better start rising up, and you better start being the person that you're meant to be, and you better start getting your act together. And I cannot and will not be dealing with all of the victim mentality that I keep hearing on FEA. I will not deal with any of the conspiracy theorists, and I will not deal with that shite anymore. Give me truth and facts. And at the end of the day, there is a process to follow. And if you choose to not follow that process and just stand there screaming and shouting, banner waving, without actually doing this stuff, then I have got no sympathy for you whatsoever. There is no reason that none of us are sitting here without our kids. And I will tell you straight, if I hadn't have gone on to Google, if I hadn't have had these people come, if I'd sat in a library or sat on Google and learnt these processes, sought out people who understood this process, instead of wasting my time with absolute idiots, then I would be sitting here with my children. And most of my time got wasted by trollers. Most of my time got wasted on the naysayers and the people who say it can't be done. Oh, you're never getting your kids back. They've got your kids. Yes, you are getting your kids back. But unfortunately, if like me, you've got two that have been adopted, then unfortunately, you've got to join the class action. And I will let you know more about that later. So take care, and arm yourself with knowledge. Knowledge is one of the most powerful tools, because it's about the only way we can protect our kids at the moment, other than the fact there's a whole community that's got to come together and boycott social services altogether. So just don't end up in the system in the first place. And if you do, understand it and get the heck out of it as quick as possible. And you know, I hope to hear of more and more and more children that are going to come back this year. And hopefully I will see you all at Alton Towers, where we will try and restore and heal a lot of families, and maybe introduce a few people who are looking for their children. And don't forget to get over to UK Families Reunited, where we're actually reuniting families. So this is Kelly Cotton, and I hope you've understood the process. Catch you later.